Hey guys, Paul here. Welcome back to TMPS Plus. Today we're going to be talking about flip monsters and their history in Yu-Gi-Oh!, kind of the rise and fall of this really forgotten mechanic, and how I think that maybe Konami could try to make it better today. Spoiler, I don't really think it's possible. I mean, power creep is power creep, but we're still going to talk about it because we have it on this channel and I do have some thoughts. So, we're going to start from the beginning, right? Flip effect monsters have been in Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally since like LOB. Some of the earliest flip effect monsters were things like Man-Eater Bug, and I think that it's a really shining example of what flip monsters were sort of supposed to be at the time. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You had your vanilla monsters that were the monsters with the better stats. That's kind of what you were going to be using to attack your opponent with and things like that. But effect monsters, by comparison, had effects that were supposed to be useful. Obviously, this didn't exactly extend to all effect monsters. There were plenty of weird, random, just impractical ones, even by the standards then. But also, flip effect monsters were kind of this thing that offered you high value in exchange for their slightly slower speed. So you have to set your flip effect monster first and then flip it face up. Either you flip it on your own turn or your opponent attacks it. And setting a flip monster meant, you weren't getting a normal summon that turn, so you were setting a monster. And flip effect monsters had a variety of roles. Obviously, with Man-Eater Bug, that was removal, and that's something that, kind of extended throughout the game. You got things like Night Assailant or Old Vindictive Magician, and even kind of looking further into the future, there's things like Raiko, Lightsworn Hunter, or Snowman Eater, things like that, right? Which technically isn't a flip effect monster, but it might as well be. And yeah, so they could be like removal that just deals with opponent's cards. Alec and I have played lots of rare hunters recently, and I've found out the power of cards like Man-Eater Bug. It's just really brutal to deal with. They sometimes didn't even destroy cards. It might have been things like Gravekeeper's Guard that like bounced a card. So either way, card removal was something that flip effect monsters specifically offered that other monsters just really couldn't do. There weren't monsters that could just spot remove something. And also, flip effect monsters could just gain you advantage. I think of things like, Dekoichi, which just flips and draws, and there were other kind of older cards like that, like Skull Angel, and I don't know, what's maybe a better one? The jar cards, those are kind of random ones. I think that those maybe, I don't even think you can categorize them. Those are literally like game flipper things. Morphing jar, cyber jar, fiber jar, a lot of them got banned pretty quickly. I think of, let's see, Penguin Soldier, right? That's one that's really good. Magical Merchant kind of comes to mind as like a slightly gimmicky but potentially really useful one. Basically, these flip effect monsters did have good effects, and what I liked about flip effect monsters later on is that they also had pretty good stats to go along with them. So in the case of like Man-Eater Bug or Magical Merchant or these jars, they usually were going to be getting destroyed in the battle that attacked them, right? Because your opponent attacking them is kind of what you expect to happen. And so usually they were going to die. When they made things like Gravekeeper's Spy and Gravekeeper's Guard, or maybe later on like Super Nimble Mega Hamster, those sorts of things, Snowman Eater, they also gave them pretty beefy defense points. So your opponent kind of had to make a bit of a choice. There was a risk there. Like if they attack this monster, not only will they take a little bit of damage and the monster won't die, but then it'll also get you additional bits of card advantage, like Gravekeeper Spy summoning another monster or whatever. So flip effect monsters did grow, I would say, with the game. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, well, they got power crept after like 2 or 3 sets. No, there were always relevant, powerful flip effect monsters that your opponent had to contend with. In fact, there were even counterplays that people did run to deal with these cards. I think of Nobleman of Crossout as one of the really big ones. It, can just banish a face-down monster, and if it happened to be a flip effect monster, it would banish all the copies. This was brutal for dealing with, Gravekeeper Spy. That was kind of the one that, in my period of time of like playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, that comes to mind the most for me as something that people would really aim to hit. I think there was Blade Knight as well. That was kind of a way to deal with flip monsters, and even Shield Crush. Some people played that when that came out later on. So, yeah, dealing with flip effect monsters was a thing because they were seen as a threat. I guess the more important thing to talk about now, though, is like, where did it all go wrong? Where exactly was like the downfall of these flip monsters? Because they certainly had heights and they certainly were feared. I think that it really just comes down to 2 things that showed their face in, if I had to pin a rough date on it, maybe 2013, 2014. So that Duelist Alliance era, right, where like Shadows and Burning Abyss and Stellar Knights and Necros and all that stuff came out. You could say maybe it was like a little bit earlier, maybe around like the Mermail, Dragon Ruler, that era. I don't know. But the point is, I think that 2 shining weaknesses, maybe not so shining weaknesses, showed up in flip effect monsters. The first being that they are slow, right? It takes time. You have to set this card, which means you are not getting to you're not progressing your game state, right? Like you're having to set a card and then your turn. That consumes your normal summon. That means that you're also not really getting to like summon other things alongside a flip monster, right? It gets set and you kind of have to end. You can set other cards, but your ability to play that turn is probably heavily stifled if it means like setting a card. And also, I think that Konami just started to give a lot of the best effects that Flip Effect Monsters had to other cards, right? So you no longer really needed Gravekeeper's Spy in order to summon something from your deck, because you can use, I don't know, Tour Guide of the Underworld, Speedroid Terror Top, Elemental Hero Stratos. I mean, just anything that like summons and searches and gains profits, or just summons and like can pop things, or can bounce things, or just interact proactively being face up on the field. So there's no need to like take the time to sort of set these cards. In addition to that, though, I think that there's kind of just this inherent value in a monster being face up as opposed to being face down. So a monster that's face down literally can't actually apply real pressure to your opponent, at least not in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Like I said back in the day, a set monster that was like a spy or a Raikou or something, there was some fear in your opponent of like attacking it because it could get you advantage. I think that though in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Things are so proactive, a set monster can be targeted, it can be popped. It doesn't restrict your opponent. It doesn't get to have like a floodgate style effect or anything like that. It's just sort of a monster that means no real tempo for the person who set it. And that really sucks, but that kind of is the case. And I would say that if I had to kind of just throw in a final thing, it's probably just that like flip effect monsters don't get to really function as well within archetypes. Now, I'm going to make a couple of examples later on with like Shaddolls and Subterror that sort of break that rule, but like generally speaking, you kind of would prefer that you were, this goes into the proactivity thing, right? Like even if you're playing an archetype that has flip monsters, when they're face down, they're not a threat, and yeah. So, there are flip monsters that are played today, but I would really argue that it's not because of being flip effect monsters, right? Like Shaddolls are pretty much all flip monsters, but are you really ever setting them? The only time I feel like the Shaddol monster gets set is like when Shaddol Falco summons it face down from the grave, and then there's like some advantage there, but generally the Shaddol monsters, their flip effect status has very little to do with their actual strategy. It's much more about being able to get advantage just when they're sent to the grave by card effects, right? And so I think that them being flip doesn't mean like flip monsters are really relevant today. They just happen to be monsters that are flip monsters that have good effects. And same goes with Subterror Guru, which is a little bit more on the like flip effects mechanic side. I always liked the Subterror archetype for this reason. They at least tried to do something with it, but there's still the big issue, which is just that you actually normal summon Subterror Guru, right? Like Subterror Guru is good, but it's mainly good because of its flip effect, or not flip effect, it's quick effect. It's quick effects to flip itself like down, another monster down, and get advantage when it's flipped face up. So you kind of have to add in all these extra things to like make Subterror Guru good. Like you have to give it a quick effect. You have to add in like the field spell to flip it up and like get advantage and those sort of things. Now, still, don't get me wrong, it's nice to see that at least the Subterror archetype exists and does something. And there's even like a few more obscure examples. Like there's like the Spirit of the Fall Winds thing that searches flip monsters from your deck. It's sort of like a Stratos, although it's awkward because, well, like, I mean, you have to like summon it, and so then you can't set the monster that turn. I always thought that an effect that they should have given that monster is that like it can search a flip monster from your deck to your hand, and then this turn you're allowed one additional set per turn. I actually think I did make a video a while back where I said that it would be really cool if Konami made a rule where like you can set two monsters face down instead of only one normal summon. So you can either like normal summon one or set two, or you could even, maybe I think it would be cool if you could normal summon one monster and set one monster in a given turn. I know that it's probably too late in Yu-Gi-Oh's sort of development for that type of rule to really be implemented. There might be something that breaks, but I don't know if I really see it. I mean, like flip effect monsters are slow, they're awkward, and even Konami's like newer attempts to make fun gimmicky ones just kind of falls flat, right? Like I know they made the Pot of the Forbidden or whatever, the Jar of the Forbidden. It's like that level 9 flip monster that has the effects of all the different like notorious ban cards. It's a cool, cute gimmick, but it's still like you have to tribute set it, and that's like really awkward and weird, so that doesn't really work out. There's Mimicking Maneater Bug. I think that came in Burst of Destiny, and I always thought that was a kind of cool one, just because it sort of tries to work around the limitations of a flip monster. It can't be destroyed in battle, and then when you flip it, you pop a card, and then it can take the type of that card, and now it can't be like hit by the effects of monsters of the same type as it. It's a whole thing, but still it doesn't fit into an archetype. It's just like a random flip monster, so you'd really rather be, summoning a tier card and searching and fusing or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know exactly that Konami can fix it. Like I said at the beginning, I kind of feel like it's a don't want to say a lost cause, but the best you're going to really get out of Flip Effect Monsters is just playing retro formats, and that's probably the only real place that they've got. But don't get me wrong, I'd like to be, proven wrong. I'd like to see if Konami can still make some sort of a modern Flip Effect deck. Prediction Princess is probably the closest they got, but like I haven't seen that, even with its like new support it got a few sets ago, and I still haven't like seen that do much of anything. So you guys can let me know down in the comments. What do you think it would take for Flip Monsters to be good again, if at all? Like, is there even any hope? I don't know. So yeah, it's gonna be it. Let's see. Before I go, I should probably say I tried this in December and failed epically, but next month or in February, I'm going to try to upload a video every day to this channel. We'll see if it works. Like I said, failed last time, but we're going to try. So subscribe so you don't miss anything. And let me know in the comments anything else I can talk about. I'm pretty much open to talking about anything in Yu-Gi-Oh!, even if I'm complaining. All right, it's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.